a running coach and ex-CFO. As a child, you witness your parents. My 30s were characterized by work and family. I gained 25 pounds, need to have impact. What gives you that energy and feel a certain way? How was my sleep before? What was my pacing schedules? I've learned to use my gut. Perseverance that I never quit. So running is just this universal sport that anyone can do, honestly. Just find friendship who have transformed so many parts of my life. So my goal today is to help others, being able to just get them excited about the sport. I just want to just be and enjoy life. I'm
26.2, a podcast powered by Drip. Hello, everyone. Welcome to 26.2. I'm super excited to have my friend Paul Yee as a guest to share his running journey. Paul, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's a treat.
Yeah, would love to just learn a bit more about your background. If you can go ahead and introduce yourself.
Absolutely. So I guess I describe myself today as a running coach and ex-CFO. I like the combination. I've always been someone who has multiple dimensions to himself. And so I recently retired from corporate life and I've run for about 10 years now. So I feel like a new runner still, but relatively late in life, I found the sport. And I just find it to have transformed so many parts of my life. So my goal today is to help others find that joy. So I spend a lot of time coaching from kids in elementary school to help them learn the sport to trainees for the Oakland Marathon. I live in Oakland and I really like to support the race. So that's where I spend a lot of my time. The other area where I spend a lot of my time relates to coaching. I like to coach Asian professionals. I've been really lucky in my career to have persevered and broken through the bamboo ceiling. And so I've really aim to help other Asian professionals find their voice and really be able to both be their authentic self, but also navigate what is sort of corporate world today. So those are where I'm spending my time these days.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I have so many follow-ups related to all of that. I guess like starting all the way from the beginning, what is your ethnic background and have you always lived in Oakland?
So I was born and bred in Oakland, a child of Chinese immigrants. And again, my Chinese identity has been something I've been exploring more recently. I grew up in Oakland, but also most of my childhood that we moved eastward to a suburb where I was frankly one of 10% of people of color. So I very much was focused on fitting in and not sort of sticking out as someone who was not sort of looking the same as my classmates. And so more recently, as a father of two kids who are now in college who are much more in tune with their identity, I've been exploring a lot about one, where do I get my drive? And I think as a child of immigrants, you kind of witness your parents. My dad in particular, he came at age 15, not knowing a word of English. He was a houseboy and figured out how to get to Cal. And so I think watching my parents persevere, and we had a middle class childhood. It wasn't one of deprivation, at least from what I could tell. But I realized they did a lot as a parent now. Wow, they're somehow navigating a lot more challenges than I do today. I complain. And so I realize as I'm on my running journey or in my business journey, I have this uh, sort of grit and sort of perseverance that I never quit. And I draw upon that. And it's now become a source of pride as I try to sort of reconcile my identity and help my kids find their identity. So it all kind of connects. And that's again where I spend my two sort of passion areas today in fitness and sort of Asian leadership.
Yeah, I thank you for sharing that. I resonate with that a lot. I think just being first generation, you experience just like your upbringing and life in a different way than kind of what the next generation is. Not quite at that next phase of life yet. So look forward to learning from you at that point. But same thing, come from an Indian background. My parents immigrated here in the 90s or 80s, sorry, late 80s, early 90s. Started completely from scratch. They were doing well in their corporate career, ended up buying boring businesses. And I kind of saw both the good and bad throughout that. We went from doing really well in kind of your average middle class home to living in kind of like a five-story estate because of these boring businesses that were doing well. But then 9/11 happened and within a span of a year, we went to living in a two-bedroom apartment shortly after. So kind of saw all like those waves and saw them kind of pick themselves back up because that's what you do as like an immigrant to give kind of like your kids as normal as a shot at childhood as possible. So definitely resonate with a lot of that.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I think we're lucky to have parents who sacrifice, and we kind of see the ebbs and flows. And what's interesting, the father of kids who are very American and they've had a fairly privileged life, frankly, is what do I do to have them achieve their goals? And so what my wife and I thought about is it's not about making money, because that's certainly one of the immigrant sort of thrusts is like, how do we make sure our kids can get the education to be self-sufficient? And I think we provided that to our boys. And so our focus for them is you need to have impact. Like our legacy is, but our honor to our ancestors and to your grandparents. And so actually both are going to be teachers. And which on paper is not the best sort of career sort of sustainability path, but I'm actually really excited for them to both focus on giving back to kids and really, following their passions. And so, yeah, I think it's these generational shifts are really fascinating to follow, and I'm really, really glad to be reflecting on that as I age.
Yeah, and I think that's extraordinary. I think people don't realize how much of an impact teachers, especially early on, have on your life later on, professionally, academically, and so forth. Yeah, and I guess just now going back, when you thought about like your career too, what shaped that? You said you were an ex-CFO. What kind of led you to pursuing that career path for yourself?
And you're going to find a theme with my life, which it wasn't this grand plan. Finance folks like to plan and have goals and metrics and so forth. There was no plan to be a CFO. And if anything, leaving undergrad as a liberal arts major, I was a book editor as my first job out of
Wow.
undergrad. So very much the side of the brain, I can't remember which side it is, but the one that was creative and very much focused on words. Did not use Excel until business school. And so I was a book editor at a small firm, and I was thinking like an analyst, not knowing it. I was editing a line of books that made zero money. It was a niche of a niche area of focus for the books. And I realized I was spending more money and putting more hours into something than the revenue I'm getting out. And as I explored grad school opportunities, business school seemed like a great deal. 2 years, you can kind of get a broad skill set, not really have any sort of specific career that you're kind of locked into, and you come out with a pretty decent salary. So I had gone to Stanford as an undergrad, and they somehow accepted me for a second time. And I'd really had a transformational experience in business school. And that really allowed me, I mentioned earlier about finding your voice. I was very meek. I was very intimidated, frankly, by all the consultants and bankers. And I realized after the first quarter, when I had pretty good grades, that it just takes confidence. And there's a bravado in business that you kind of have to embrace. And then I moved into a corporate role at the Gap. This is 1999, so most of my classmates were building their first dot-coms, and frankly, many of them were on the cover. There's actually a Time magazine cover story on my class because we were the first
Wow.
internet class. But I had to go to something I understood. I was, again, a newer person in business. And so, hey, I understand the Gap. And I was a consumer, and so I entered their MBA program. They hired MBA graduates. And so most of my career has been in consumer. I really love the challenge of solving a consumer challenge that's driven by a creative process. And I've loved working alongside folks, like, for example, like the merchants and designers at the Gap. I spent 8 years at Pete's Coffee, where I worked with the coffee buyers. My first CFO gig was at Method Products, which is this great soap company, and it's very much about bringing design and green ingredients to the cleaning category. And then finally, I was a CFO at Stitch Fix, which was bringing back my sort of apparel experience at the Gap, but with technology and really helping people find clothes they love. So I've just been really lucky to have really creative environments where I brought the rigor and analysis. But again, I was a book editor back in the day, so also learning how to tell the story through numbers and how to help people get inspired by a goal, but also how to analyze a problem. And so thematically, it's always been around just being a partner to the business and helping them achieve amazing products. And that sort of drove most of my career. But then I decided I was ready for a break, and after one quick stint at a startup, I wanted to focus on things that really gave me joy, which is why I'm here today.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So much experience. And I just like love hearing about like your background too, because it's not just one specific like company that you work for, one specific like industry even, but I like how everything almost went full circle too, with kind of the apparel and like the retail background. And that's incredible. It's almost like you kept working and like all these opportunities kept fitting in. And I'm sure in retrospect, everything kind of like lined up the way it was supposed to be as
I've
well.
thought a lot about serendipity versus intentionality. And again, I think planning does play a role. So again, I might poo-poo and say, hey, I never really wanted to be a CFO until I became a CFO. I
Yeah.
do think there's something about having kind of a clarity around what gives you that energy. And so I always love product, as I mentioned. I love partnering with people who are very much in the center of the creative energy of a company. And so I always positioned myself for the opportunities. I wasn't sort of sitting in my hands and waiting for opportunities to come to me. I always was edging left and right. And so specific to corporate finance, it has a lot of functions within that. So I grew up in sort of financial planning analysis, just more the budgeting analysis. But I was always curious on the accounting side. People say, oh, accounting is so boring. I was really curious about how you account for the numbers, and there's actually some art to that. So I was always asking the questions, and CFOs need to have that well-roundedness to be successful. You can't just be in one silo. And the other thing that I really enjoyed, which is I think a theme for anyone who wants to be successful in the career, is I found joy in inspiring and leading people. People management is a hard part of being a leader, but it's the integral part for you to be successful because you can't do anything by yourself as you move up. You have to inspire and set vision and be really good at giving feedback. And so somehow I think I got good at that. I think a part of I love the joy of finding sort of people thriving under that. But I think that was probably the one linchpin that allowed me to achieve C-suite status, unlike any of the technical or sort of soft skills. It was really around people leadership.
Yeah. And that totally makes sense too. And it even, to me, at least like from the outside, it segues into what you're doing now with running as well. And then also kind of giving back to the Asian communities or like founders or just operators in the space who fall under Asian American. Segueing into that, I know you said you've been running for 10 years. That's how your profile on LinkedIn kind of caught my attention months ago. Would love to hear what your why is, how you started, and yeah, just kind of diving into the genesis of your running story.
So my 30s were characterized by work and family. So my kids were born when I was 29 and 32. And I can't even remember exactly what was happening. They're now in college. I've empty nest. I'm all like, this is great. And it's all consuming being a parent, a young parent. So that's sort of the point of my life when I was really focused on my career. My why, which has not changed, is have a happy and healthy family. And so from my perspective, having a thriving career, being able to sort of provide for my family was really critical. And so I was going to the office at 5 in the morning. I was working at Method. I oversaw a team in Europe, so I wanted to be there at least virtually for them, for part of their day. Somehow squeezed a run in before 5 a.m. So I don't remember how I did that. And I was traveling the world and just working really hard. It was just something I didn't know any alternative to. The consequence of that, though, is I gained 25 pounds above my driver's license weight. Was not healthy at all. Was not eating well. And I think I recall it was just a picture that I saw from an album of our trip to Hawaii, and I was shirtless and just, it was a happy picture, me sort of carrying the kids through the water, and it's like, oh my gosh, I was pasty white at a dad bod, and it was sort of a wake up call. I was 40 was approaching, so I think I was getting to this midlife crisis moment, and being a very goal driven person, it's okay, I'm going to fix this. And so it's very boring. I used my fitness pal. I started counting calories, and it's actually remarkably easy to lose the weight. I think it is very much about caloric intake, and so I shed that fairly quickly, and so that led to not running, but then to the gym. So I started personal training and learning the ins and outs of weightlifting, and the gym is right next to a lake where I live in Oakland called Lake Merritt, and it's just this perfect 5K loop. And after my trainings, I just started to think, hey, maybe run a mile, just sort of see what that feels like. And somehow it just started to snowball from there. I ran the loop, which was the 5K. I started uh, joining the running group that's in my neighborhood and signed up for half marathon 6 months later. Went through the training program, which really gave me the confidence and the community to lean on. And that was 10 years ago. And so now, I did a marathon, I think a year after that. So now I've run 12 marathons. I'm an active member in that training program. I'm a pacer and I help co-chair a buddy program to help newer runners. And yeah, we can go deeper on running, but I just think it taps into one, the drive I have. It's very goal oriented. You can very much find progress quite quickly, and that's inspiring for me. I'm motivated by change and being able to turn knobs and seeing, hey, this works, and I see the results pretty quickly. But as I've evolved over the 10 years, what I've also found for running is very much it's not just a solo sport, but a community sport. So we didn't talk about my childhood. I was very much introvert and shy, and I have just learned to come on my own and just find friendship and camaraderie from people who share this passion, but also come from many, many, many different walks of life. So running is just this universal sport that anyone can do, honestly, and attracts lots of different personalities and people from different paths of life. And I just find joy in that. So I'm very much now a community runner. I do have my solo runs when I need to meditate and reflect, but I find even more fun just being able to run with others.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, such an incredible story too, walking through that. And on your last bit, I think it's so true. And I don't know what it is, but I find that anytime I meet like a new runner, it's almost like you become instant friends. You're doing something completely different. You come from a very different background. You're at a different age or stage of life or phase of life too. There's something about like the running community that's like so synced up together. And I think it's incredible to see
I always
that.
thought about the cross country kids in high school being the nicest, but I think it's not really a team. There's a team element to it and there's individual goals. So I think that combination of individual and group really helps a lot. And obviously you're spending a lot of time, especially when you're training for a marathon, 20
Yeah.
miles with anyone, you can't but
Like,
not
love
get to know
that.
someone. And you're kind of like running parallel, so you don't have to like deal with the weird eye contact thing. You kind of just
Yeah.
and then there's so much to talk about from running. We can geek out about, Garmin metrics and fueling tips. So just lots to talk about both within running and outside.
Yeah, I mean, you just read my mind. I was just going to dive into that too, in terms of like what you use for performance metrics, how you track your own performance, what fuel you use, and kind of how regimented that is for when you're training for something or if you're pacing a group as
It's
well.
evolved a lot. So again, lots of transformation in my life. I think going in, as I noted, my personality caught into the metrics. Oh my gosh, it's like metrics are awesome because it helps you um, allow you to manage how I manage businesses, which is like variances are your friends. Like if you have a goal and you miss or beat the goal, there's a reason for that variance, and like digging into what was the root cause and whether it's did I feel a certain way, how was my sleep before the night before, what was my pacing schedule. So I love it. It's like a kid in a candy store. But I've also learned, and we can kind of go deeper on those fronts. I've learned to use my gut. There's an element of like, I'm not feeling it today. And instead of like pushing, persevering that, following the plan to a T and making sure I check that box, I listen to my body and make sure that I am recovering and kind of getting in tune. Sometimes you kind of get so focused on the exterior drivers that you forget about
Plan
learning
too.
to your internal measure of being. And so I think again, the best is always the both. And so I very much have learned to shape my plan. And when you get to a certain age, like my age today, you're slowing down. So you also have to not get so focused on personal bests. And so I think, 10 years in, I'm probably, maybe I could do my PR. My PR is 5 years old now. So maybe I can get back to it now that I'm retired and have more time. But I'm not solely focused on that. And I want to end a run with a smile and feel really good. But there's lots of knobs I'm turning, which we can talk about deeper, that I think there's still room to grow, I think.
Yeah. And I guess just like on that, even comparing 10 years ago to now, like what does your running schedule look like during the week? And did you run today or are you planning on it? And what does that kind of look like for
Yes,
you?
it's part of my growth. So I ran a marathon in December. So during training season, I try to run 5 to 6 days a week. It depends on I usually want to have one quiet day, and I also have one day at the gym. And usually on the gym day, I may do a light run. And so I think I was peaking at 50 miles a week. And so now I'm in another training cycle. So that was December. And now the Oakland Marathon is in March. I've signed up for it. But I also know back-to-back marathons are just pretty risky for someone who doesn't focus on recovery. And so I didn't run today. I had the flu last week, and again, I think my body was telling me to like just chill. So I run lightly the past few days, and I might run today like 3 miler. So I think because I'm more relaxed about this upcoming marathon, I'm not as focused on mileage. A couple of other things that I've been doing. So I always have the long runs on Saturday. That's formalized by my training program. So we're going to do 18 miler this Saturday. I pace the 10-minute mile group, so it's quite relaxed, and that's the whole point of these easy runs. But I also do track training. That's been another sort of element that I've found ironically really helps you with endurance running. It's not something that seems obvious, but by doing intervals, I find that I can put in that second gear, especially near the end when I'm sort of mentally drained. So I like to turn the knobs and try different things, but it's pretty much one track workout, one long run, and then during the week when I have time. And now that I'm retired, I am more flexible. I'm sort of doing whenever I feel like it, which is really
Yeah.
prudent to say. But it's, when it's dark and rainy, shoot, I don't feel the need to go out there right away.
Yeah, for sure. That totally makes sense. Talk to me about fuel, like for this last race that you did, and then even now too. So when you're in a training cycle, are there certain things that you restrict? Are there certain things you focus on? Anything from like meal prep to actual like supplements that you're taking on the runs as well?
Yeah, so I reflect on my nutrition both during the run and also around the run. So during the run, I found my formula, at least for the past 2 or 3 races. I use Morton gels. There's both a caffeinated and an uncaffeinated version, and I alternate every 4 miles. Pretty straightforward, which is probably a little bit more frequent than what you might see online as sort of the amount of carbohydrates. I just found, I know that I'm on the smaller side and the leaner side. I just found that that works. The energy hits me before it's drained. So I'll do that every 4 miles and alternate the caffeine and uncaffeinated. And it's worked in my stomach has been able to tolerate that. And then in terms of hydration, I can wear a hydration vest, and I put in 2 tablets of noon, and I just sort of sip to thirst. And you're making sure, obviously, every time I consume a gel, down that with some water. So that's sort of during the race, and it seems to work. And I don't like to mess with it, and I don't bonk as anymore. So I know that fueling formula works for me. During the training season, around the other days, I just try to. I don't. Again, I think when I'm trying to focus on weight, which is usually off season, I'm very strict. I had gained weight during a marathon training. It's actually quite often the case because people have this relaxed nature towards nutrition, which is fine because you can't really focus on many things. So I had gained like 10 pounds like a year ago, and I was like shocking when I was finishing the marathon cycle. And so this past round, I was being more intentional about my eating, and so my little hack to just make sure I don't gain weight is I eat the exact same lunch every day. It's ground turkey and beans and bell peppers. And my wife is just looking at how can you eat that every time? But it's just great. It's like it's 2 servings I prepare every other day, and I don't think about it. It's hearty. It feels, tastes decent, and then I can relax around the other meals, and that generally works. And the last thing I do is I focus on protein intake. Again, at the gym where I work out at, they really emphasize consuming about 1 gram of protein per pound of weight that you have, and so which is a lot for me, I think for anyone. And so I really focus on protein, and I need to have carbs for running, but like really I eat meat and take a protein powder just to kind of make sure I'm focusing on that macro.
Yeah, and it's very holistic too. And it seems like you figured out like what works for you. And I'm sure that kind of took like trial and error for the first few races that you did, or even the first few years that you were running too. Same lunch every single day. I don't know if I could do that.
Yeah, I just advise. I think to your point about trial and error, and because runners are now that I feel, I'm like a sage runner, and people come to me for advice. I definitely think the long runs are all about trial and see what works, and what works for one person may not be for others. So it's important that you try it out, not during a race. Never try something new during a race, but during these practice runs, so you can get the rhythm and just see how your body responds, and ultimately you find that formula that works for you.
Yeah. That totally makes sense. And is that all? I'm going to assume that's also kind of like how you approach it when you're coaching kids as well, because I know that's like a different space. And I'm not sure how old these kids are or the people that you're coaching, because I'm sure they're kind of in the same stage where they're living with their parents. So nutrition is kind of taken care of. But curious how that comes into play.
Oh my gosh. So they're 9 and 10 years old, and this is my second season. And I went into my first season with grand hopes. I thought, here I am, this inspiring Newt Rockney of running and being able to just get them excited about the sport. And it was complete chaos. And yeah, I take complete blame for this. These are kids who are, pent up in school and this after school program, as you can imagine. So they just have a lot of energy. And the last thing I do is listen to this old guy tell him how to pace. And so the second season, I've been much more thoughtful of keeping it short and sweet and um, talking slower, having three clear expectations, listen to the coach, do your best, and work as a team. And I repeat that. I start every practice with those three expectations, and then I highlight examples. We do a team game, and then we do warm-ups and a couple games, and then we do a long run, which is usually a mile and a half around the school. So I'm learning that my wife's a teacher. Both my kids are gonna be teachers, and so they've laughed at me because, like, I'm usually the CFO who's very driven, and like I've had to learn to chill. And again, so what I love about even in my stage of life, I'm constantly learning new things, and I just love building my toolkit. And the kids have taught me a lot. The kids mean that the students who I'm teaching how to run, how to just slow down and find joy in the moment and not get too frustrated with myself.
Yeah. And I'm sure it's just like very entertaining, if anything. You have a new
Oh,
story.
much so. Very. The kids just, yeah, they're unfiltered, and this is this unfettered joy that, shoot, I wish I had that. Um, for that freedom. And so maybe by coaching them, I get a little bit of that exposure these days.
Yeah, sure. How do you balance it between coaching kids, training for your own race, being a pacer or like being involved in training like newer runners as well? How does that schedule kind of line up for you?
Yeah, and I'm about a year into my retirement basically, and I think I'm really surprised how busy I am. I've gotten a lot of mentorship from people who are ahead of me, and they say don't sign up for too much, you're gonna get busy, and it's so true. And again, hopefully it's inspiring for those of you who are looking toward this stage. It's something that I hadn't really planned like explicitly by this age I wanted to be this, but I now that I'm in, it's like wow, this is like the best. And so I feel very grateful that I led a pretty frugal life and just invested my money accordingly so I can have this privilege. But I think how I do it is I try to only have 2 to 3 things a day. There's switching costs that are both mental and physical. And so I try not to like pack in like you used to have with your job. You'd have meetings after meetings, and that's the reality of of work. But I think when you're constantly having to shift from mentoring an Asian professional who's in tech to
Yeah.
teaching a fourth grader how to run, I just try to make sure I only have 2 or 3 sort of things, and I build time that is quiet time. As an introvert, I need that re-energizing time, so I focused a lot on writing and how to have some quiet runs on my own. But I also have learned just to be easy on myself. I think me being sick last week was a wake-up call that, oh, you're kind of overdoing it a little bit, Paul. And the other thing is like lowering my standards a bit. Like there's an intensity I bring to everything I do, and I don't know why. I want to do the best job possible. When you're volunteering, often it's like you're not being paid, you're not being assessed, you're not. No one's going to grade you. So why not just chill, Paul? And so that's again part of my journey I'm in, learning. I want to live for many, many years. So there's no need to have this stress. And so just like if I make a mistake or if I overdo it, I just sort of recover, just like running. You kind of just keep going another step and just not dwelling too much in the past.
Yeah, totally makes sense. I feel like I've learned so much from you just kind of going through this episode
I'm a
alone.
little scattered at times. So hopefully you're getting 1 or 2 nuggets. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, of course. And now just kind of like shifting gears, and I meant to ask this like earlier. What has been your best marathon memory? However you quantify that.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that came to mind is my personal best, and as always, there's a learning from any race. But this was a year where I had no expectations. This is 2017. I just joined a company, Stitch Fix, and we're going public. So when you're going public, so before the actual day you ring the bell, you are in a private jet flying between cities. I remember I was like in Kansas City talking to investors, and I was running from Missouri to Kansas. I thought it was interesting. I could cross the state line. So you're just constantly on your feet, talking constantly. And I was somehow squeezing in miles. I remember getting lost. We're in New York City. I got lost in the pitch black darkness of Central Park. And so, of course, the marathon. So it was 2 or 3 weeks after we went public and we rang the bell. I said, there's no way I'm going to do that well. Like, it's just, I hadn't done the mileage, certainly. My mind was completely fried. It's a very stressful sort of process, as you can imagine. And so I did my best. I kind of went into the race with very low expectations, as I noted, and I think that in a weird way freed me from the pressures that probably I was self-imposing, and I killed it. And I try to reflect on that story, whether it's maybe I just was superhuman and younger and adrenaline was pumping through my veins, but I also think there's something about expectations where if you're very open-minded about what your goals are. I like to have 3 goals in every race, you
Yeah.
know, and cross the finish line with a smile, so a reasonable time goal, and then a PR. You always have some goal that you achieve, and so that was just something that I look back on. I don't know if I can get back to it. My last race in December was the same course as my PR, and I was 7 minutes slower. So, okay, I think maybe I can chip away at it over time, but I don't know how I did it. And so that's something I kind of look back on and just remind myself, like, don't put undue expectations on myself.
Yeah. It almost seems like you were like on autopilot too. You were like, I knew I had to do this race, and I'm gonna like finish it, which was gonna be the next follow-up I asked you is how has kind of the mental component of being a marathoner come into play? Because even before you retired, you were still running races. You were juggling other responsibilities at the same time. How did you kind of compartmentalize that for
Mhm.
running?
Well, running definitely provides a lot of people, including myself, this meditative space that allows you to kind of just process thoughts. I remember doing PowerPoint slides in my runs. I thought that was really efficient. So it was always my me time. And there is an element where, as I've mentioned, it's just back to like this spectrum. I've often run with clear metrics, and I'm looking at my pace and my watch regularly, and that works at times. But what I've found in my fitness, I'll start with weightlifting. Like I weightlift with a methodology that's to failure. So I overload my muscles with the weight that's such that I fail within 90 seconds or so, 90 to 120 seconds. And usually at the edge of ability, so near the end when I barely can move, like it's usually my brain that is the barrier. It was like the voice in my head is saying, Paul, you can't do it, just stop, it hurts. And what I do is I go into this space that's sort of just completely black. I kind of like get in tune with my muscles, not thinking at all. And I just sort of focus on the muscle or muscle complex that's moving. And then I'm able to eke out 1 or 2 more reps. And so with running, so a marathon, a mile 20, it's the same kind of sort of reality. You do have the ability to run 6 more miles, right? It's all mental. And
Yeah.
so I try to get into that zone. I usually have music playing and just sort of like be present in the moment, like just how's my body feeling, what muscles are aching, and just sort of acknowledge it and kind of keep moving. And so that's what I've learned is to kind of I don't have a way to describe it. It's just like it's not a dark space and like a negative space. It's just like this just sort of void that I try to enter because usually it's my brain, that's the muscle that is like really the one that's failing first. And therefore I try to like uh, put the strain away from the brain into other parts of the muscles. So I don't know if that makes sense. That's how I persevere in those moments where it's like very much a mental game.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's almost like I feel like running is almost like the balance between the two, or it's like an argument between the two. You know, if your mind is saying like you're tired, but your body is saying no, we can keep going, or almost like vice versa sometimes too. Your body's saying you're tired, but your mind is like, I've done this before, so I can keep going
I
as
have
well.
like 3 parts I try to align. It's so two of the ones you mentioned, like mind and body, and then heart. So I kind of like whenever I'm like doing my mile check when I'm running a race, okay, how the 3 align? And usually the heart's the one I kind of draw on at the end. It's like, okay, I always know I'm doing this for my family and for myself. Like I want to show that I'm healthy, and I know I feel great once I have that medal around my neck. And so I usually try to make sure the 3 are aligned, and I do a check, and if one's faltering, I kind of lean on the other two.
Yeah, I like that too. adding another organ into the mix. What's next? I know you said you have a marathon coming up in March.
I
What
have
is
two actually. So one in
okay?
March, I've signed up. They haven't picked me yet to be a pacer. I've never paced a race, which is I think another interesting challenge. But goodness gracious, I definitely don't want to screw that up. The people will be relying on you.
Yeah.
So it's set up slow, much slower pace, and that's another challenge. Like actually running really slow relative to your natural pace is another thing. So I'm hoping they pick me. So I think that'll be a nice challenge. And I'm also doing Avenue Giants. It is in the Wedgwood country in California. Um, and that's in May. I have a friend in Scotland who wants to run it, and so he's coming to town. And so, okay, I'll run it with you. So these next few races are less about time and pace and more finding joy in the sport, helping others enjoy their experience. And of course, when I'm in the race, I'm going to race it. Like I always tell myself, oh, it's for fun. I'll end up racing it. But I tell myself that, and back to my learnings about expectations. Like, just relax. And it kind of speaks to like what's next for me. I don't know. I mean, I think. I remember once talking to someone who was younger, and I was saying, what should I do? I should be working. I should be giving back. I should be, giving back to the community. And hopefully you sense that I am putting some of my focus areas there. But she said, why are you saying should? Like, why are you living your life at this stage of life in this world of shoulds? And I think it was a really insightful observation. I've always been someone who should be doing something back to my immigrant,
Yeah.
parents, honoring their sacrifices. I really should try to uplift their legacy and stand on their shoulders. And so I think I've always been driven by that. And there's elements that are good, but I think there's a point where I just need to like as I said, at like mile 20 of a marathon, I just want to just be and enjoy life. I'm more than halfway done with my life, and I want to savor every moment. So our plans are to travel every year. My wife and I were college sweethearts, and we spent a semester at Oxford. So last summer we spent 5 weeks in London. And so we thought about moving there at some point, but that just didn't make sense in the end. We love Oakland too much. But really to see the world and make sure we can spend time with the sons when we can and before they truly leave the nest. So feel very blessed to have this flexibility. I recognize I sit in a lot of privilege, but hopefully I'm giving back enough to make it a good balance.
Yeah. This was so much fun. Thank you so much, just for kind of sharing your story and sharing all elements of it as well. And I'm excited to hear about how both the races in March and May go.
Same here. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been fun to talk about my journey.
Yeah. Awesome. Learn more about Drip at dripco.us and follow us on Instagram at dripwearable. We'll be back soon with a brand new episode.